The Galactic Council had been sending invitations to Earth for exactly 347 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Not that anyone was counting. Well, except for Vex Prime Korath, who had been counting every single day because it was literally his job to keep track of these things, and frankly, he was getting a bit tired of it. Another invitation returned to sender, announced his assistant, Zilp, waving a holographic document that flickered with the universal symbol for address unknown. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Everyone knew where Earth was. It was right there on the star charts, sitting in the Sol system like a blue-green marble that had somehow learned to ignore cosmic bureaucracy. Korath's 4 eyes rolled in perfect synchronization, a feat that had taken him years to master and always impressed the interns. "Let me guess," he said, his voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that could corrode hull plating. "They claim they never received it?" "Actually, sir," Zilp consulted his datapad. This time they sent back a message. It says, and I quote, "Sorry, we were busy." Rain check? The silence that followed was so profound that you could have heard a pin drop, if pins existed in space, and if space wasn't a vacuum. The assembled council members, representing 47 different species from across the galaxy, sat in stunned silence. Some had tentacles, some had fur, some were just glowing orbs of pure energy. But they all shared one thing, complete and utter bewilderment. "Rain check?" repeated Counselor Thrix, whose species had evolved from amphibians and took weather metaphors very seriously. "What is this rain check of which they speak?" "It's a human expression," explained Korath, who had made it his business to study every species in the galaxy, including the ones that apparently couldn't be bothered to show up to meetings. "It means they want to postpone something indefinitely while maintaining the illusion that they actually intend to do it later." "Ah," said Counselor Bleep, nodding sagely with all 7 of his heads. "So they are lying." "Creatively avoiding commitment," Korath corrected. "There's a difference, apparently." The truth was, the Galactic Council had been trying to contact Earth ever since they'd noticed the humans had achieved faster than light travel. It had started innocently enough. A simple welcome to the neighborhood message, followed by an invitation to join the galactic community. Standard procedure. Every species got one. Most species responded within a decade. Some took longer because they were still figuring out the technology. The Blorvians had taken 50 years, but that was because they'd spent 49 of those years arguing about whether the invitation was genuine or an elaborate prank. The Zephyrians had responded immediately, but only to complain about the font choice. But the humans had somehow managed to turn non-response into an art form. "Sir," Zilp interrupted his thoughts, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Outer Rim monitoring station." Korath's primary eye perked up. The Outer Rim was where they kept the early warning systems, the ones that were supposed to detect massive fleet movements or potential threats to galactic peace. It was also where they sent junior officers who had made the mistake of asking too many questions during orientation. "Put it through," he commanded. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the somewhat panicked face of Lieutenant QX, whose species had evolved from prey animals and therefore had a tendency to look panicked even on good days. Today was clearly not a good day. "Vex Prime Korath, Sir," QX began, his voice shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. "We've detected a massive fleet approaching Council space. Approximately 1,000 vessels, traveling in formation." The Council chamber erupted in chaos. Well, as much chaos as a room full of dignified galactic representatives could manage. There was concerned murmuring, tentacle wringing, and at least one species that expressed alarm by changing colors rapidly. "Origin?" Korath demanded. "That's the thing, sir," QX replied, his voice somehow managing to shake even more. "They're not from any known galactic civilization. The ship designs are unusual, very angular, lots of right angles, and they're painted in something called naval gray, which our databases indicate is a color specifically chosen to look intimidating." "Hostile?" "Unknown, sir. They're not responding to our standard hails. But they're also not shooting at anything, so that's something." Korath's headache was getting worse. In his 3 centuries of diplomatic service, he'd dealt with trade disputes, border conflicts, and that one unfortunate incident where an entire species had declared war over a misunderstanding about sandwich recipes. But this was different. This felt bigger. What's their heading? Directly toward Council Prime, sir. ATA approximately 6 standard hours. The chamber fell silent again. Council Prime was the seat of galactic government, home to representatives from across the galaxy, and generally considered the most peaceful place in known space. It was also heavily defended, but more in a ceremonial guard way than 1,000 unknown warships. Way, an Aeri Misa. Sir QX continued, there's something else. We've managed to intercept some of their communications. The fleet appears to be human. You could have heard a pin drop again, except this time it would have been an even more impressive pin, possibly made of neutronium. Human? Korath repeated, his voice flat with disbelief. Yes, sir. We've confirmed it through linguistic analysis. They're speaking various human languages, primarily what our databases identify as English and Mandarin, with some scattered Spanish and what sounds like very creative profanity. Counselor Thrix leaned forward, his amphibian features creased with concern. But humans are supposed to be primitive. Our last reports indicated they were still fighting among themselves over natural resources and territorial disputes. That was last week's report, Zilt murmured, consulting his datapad. This week's report is significantly different. How significantly? Korath asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. They appear to have unified their planet, established a functioning space fleet, and developed technology that our analysts are describing as uncomfortably advanced. Uncomfortably advanced? The technical term is how did they do that so fast and why didn't we notice? Zilt translated. Korath rubbed his temples, all 4 of them, in a gesture that had become depressingly familiar over the centuries. Let me see if I understand this correctly. The humans, who have been ignoring our invitations for over 3 centuries, have now decided to show up uninvited with a fleet of 1,000 warships. As that appears to be the situation, yes, sir. And they're heading directly toward the most important diplomatic facility in the galaxy? Correct, sir. And we have no idea what they want. None whatsoever, sir. Korath stood up, his full height of 8 feet commanding the attention of the chamber. Well then, he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of diplomatic experience, I suppose we're about to find out. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Emergency protocols were activated. Defense fleets were scrambled. Diplomatic channels were opened, closed, and opened again when it became clear that nobody really knew what to do in this situation. The humans, for their part, maintained radio silence. They just kept coming, their 1,000 ships arranged in perfect formation, like they were on their way to a parade rather than a potential diplomatic incident. Sir, QX reported from the outer rim, the fleet has just entered our inner sensor range. We're getting detailed scans now. And? Boenbeo. The ships are impressive, heavily armed, but not in a way that suggests immediate aggression. Are like they're prepared for anything. And sir? Yes. Waigomir, yes. They're flying flags. Flags? Atabe? Specifically, a large banner that reads sorry we're late in 17 different languages. Korath blinked, all 4 eyes. Twice. They're apologizing? It would appear so, sir. The view screen in the council chamber flickered to life, showing the approaching human fleet. They were indeed flying a massive banner, and even from a distance, the words sorry we're late were clearly visible in multiple scripts and languages. Well, said Counselor Bleem, this is unexpected. That's one word for it, Korath muttered. As the fleet drew closer, more details became visible. The ships were sleek, powerful, and clearly designed by a species that had spent a lot of time thinking about both form and function. But they were also decorated with what appeared to be motivational slogans, and, in some cases, nose art featuring various Earth animals. Sir QX's voice crackled through the comm. We're receiving a transmission from the lead ship. It's interesting. Put it through. The holographic display shifted to show a human face. The being was relatively young by galactic standards, with dark hair, brown eyes, and what appeared to be some kind of uniform. But what struck Korath immediately was the human's expression, confident, slightly amused, and completely unapologetic. "Galactic Council," the human began. "This is Admiral Maya Torres of the Terran Federation Navy. We're here for the meeting." "Meeting?" Korath managed to croak. "The Galactic Council meeting. We got your invitation. All 347 of them, actually. We've been meaning to RSVP, but we've been a bit busy. You know how it is." "Busy?" Korath repeated slowly. "Oh yes, wars to end, governments to unify, technologies to develop, that sort of thing. We wanted to make sure we were ready before we showed up. First impressions and all that." "And you thought showing up with 1,000 warships would make a good first impression?" Admiral Torres smiled, and Korath had to admit it was a rather charming expression, even if it was attached to someone who had just brought enough firepower to level a small moon to what was supposed to be a peaceful diplomatic meeting. "Well," Torres said, "we figured it was better to be prepared. Besides, these aren't warships. They're diplomatic vessels." "Diplomatic vessels," Korath repeated, his voice completely flat. "Absolutely. They're just heavily armed diplomatic vessels. We've found that diplomacy works much better when backed by overwhelming firepower. It's a human thing." The silence that followed was broken by Counselor Thrix, who was apparently the only one brave enough to ask the obvious question. "Admiral Torres, what exactly do you want?" Torres' smile widened. "Oh, that's simple. We want to join the Galactic Council. We want to establish trade relations. We want to share technology and cultural exchange. We want to be part of the galactic community." "And you needed 1,000 ships for that?" "Well, no, but we also wanted to discuss some concerns we have about galactic security. You see, we've been monitoring your communications for the past few centuries, and we've noticed some issues." "Issues?" Pirates, slavers, unauthorized weapons trafficking, general lawlessness in the outer sectors. We thought we might be able to help with that." Korath felt his headache intensifying. "Help how?" "By providing security services. Think of it as a neighborhood watch program, but with more advanced weaponry and a much larger coverage area." "You want to be the galaxy's police force?" "We prefer security consultants. But yes, essentially." The implications of this statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. 1,000 human warships, operating as a galactic police force, with the apparent backing of a species that had somehow unified their entire planet and developed advanced technology in the span of a few centuries. "Admiral Torres," Korath said carefully, "perhaps we should discuss this in person. Would you be willing to come aboard our station for formal negotiations?" "Of course. Though I should warn you, we'll be bringing a full diplomatic team, and security detail, and cultural attaches, and probably some food, because we weren't sure what passes for cuisine around here." "How many people are we talking about?" "Oh, not many. Maybe a few hundred. We like to be thorough." Korath closed his eyes, all 4 of them, and tried to imagine explaining this to his superiors. As the humans had arrived, they wanted to join the galactic community. They also wanted to reorganize galactic security. And they'd brought 1,000 ships to make their point. "Admiral Torres," he said finally, "welcome to the Galactic Council. We have a lot to discuss." "Excellent," Torres replied. "This is going to be fun." As the transmission ended, Korath turned to the assembled council members, who were all staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to terror to what might have been excitement. "Well," he said, "this should be interesting." Outside the viewport, the human fleet maintained its perfect formation, 1,000 ships arranged like a promise, a threat, and an invitation all rolled into one. The humans had finally arrived at the galactic party. They'd just brought their own entertainment. The docking bay on Council Prime had never seen anything quite like the human delegation. Admiral Torres had arrived exactly as promised, with a few hundred beings in tow, carrying what appeared to be enough equipment to establish a small colony. They also brought food, which turned out to be an excellent decision, because galactic cuisine was apparently not to human tastes. "What exactly is that?" asked Counselor Grix, pointing at a steaming container that smelled like it contained something that had died and been reborn as flavor. "Pizza," replied Dr. Elena Vasquez, "the human cultural attack. It's a traditional Earth food made with bread, tomatoes, cheese, and whatever else happens to be available. This particular one has pepperoni, which is a type of preserved meat. It smells like warfare," Grix observed. "Only the good kind," Vasquez assured him. Meanwhile, Admiral Torres was conducting what could generously be called a diplomatic meeting, though it felt more like a corporate takeover presentation. She had somehow managed to turn the main council chamber into a command center, complete with holographic displays showing fleet positions, trade route analyses, and what appeared to be a comprehensive breakdown of every security threat in the galaxy. "As you can see," Torres was saying, gesturing to a three-dimensional map that rotated slowly in the air, "piracy incidents have increased by 47% in the last decade. Response times by local security forces average 6 hours and 32 minutes. Frankly, that's unacceptable." Arath, who had been trying to maintain some semblance of control over the proceedings, cleared his throat. "Admiral, while we appreciate your analysis, the Galactic Council has been managing security matters for over 2 millennia. "And how's that working out?" Torres asked, her tone so politely devastating that it could have been weaponized. The silence that followed was telling. Several council members suddenly found their data pads very interesting. Counselor Thrix began examining his webbed fingers as if he'd never seen them before. Even the energy beings seemed to dim slightly. "We've had some challenges," Korath admitted. "Challenges," Torres repeated. "Is that what you call the Vorthan slave trade? The Mexian weapon smuggling rings? The complete breakdown of law enforcement in the Outer Rim?" "Now see here," began Counselor Bliamp, rising to his considerable height, "the Galactic Council has protocols for dealing with these situations." "Yes, I've read your protocols," Torres replied, producing a data pad that was roughly the size of a small book. "All 14,000 pages of them. Very thorough, very detailed, completely useless." "I beg your pardon?" "By the time your protocols are followed, the pirates have moved on, the slaves have been sold, and the weapons have been distributed. You're fighting yesterday's war with tomorrow's paperwork." Dr. Marcus Webb, the human military analyst, stepped forward. He was a tall, lean man with the kind of eyes that suggested he'd seen things he'd rather forget. "We've been monitoring galactic communications for the past 3 centuries, he said. "We've identified 17 major criminal organizations, 43 active pirate fleets, and at least 6 governments that are actively involved in illegal activities. Monitoring our communications?" Korath's voice rose several octaves. "That's a violation of Article 47 of the Galactic Communications Treaty," Webb interrupted, "which specifically allows for monitoring of open channels for security purposes. We checked." "We checked? You checked?" "We also read your laws. All of them. It took a while." Torres smiled again, and Korath was beginning to recognize that expression as a warning sign. "We've been doing our homework, Vex Prime. We wanted to be prepared." "But prepared for what, exactly?" "For this conversation. For joining the galactic community. For taking our place as a responsible member of civilized space." She paused, and her expression became more serious. "And for cleaning up the mess that everyone else has been ignoring." The chamber erupted in indignant protests. Representatives from dozens of species began speaking, or chittering, or making whatever sounds they used to express outrage. The energy beings began flashing in agitated patterns. Even the usually calm Blorvians began gesticulating wildly. "Order!" Korath shouted, banging his ceremonial gavel with enough force to crack the podium. "Order in the chamber." When relative quiet had been restored, Counselor Thrix spoke up. "Admiral Torres, what exactly are you proposing?" "Simple," Torres replied. "We want to join the Galactic Council as a full member. We want to establish trade relations with all interested parties. We want to share our technology and learn from yours. And we want to help with the security situation. Help how? By doing what apparently no one else has been willing to do. We want to hunt down the pirates, shut down the slave trade, and bring some actual law and order to the galaxy. With your 1,000 warships, Korath said flatly. With our 1,000 diplomatic vessels, yes. Plus whatever additional resources might be required. Additional resources? Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the human science officer, stepped forward. She was a compact woman with silver hair and the kind of intense focus that suggested she could solve complex equations in her sleep. We've developed some new technologies that might be relevant, she said. Improved faster-than-light communication, enhanced sensor arrays, more efficient weapons systems. More efficient weapons systems, Korath repeated. Much more efficient. We've also made some advances in artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and what we call creative problem solving. Creative problem solving? It's a human specialty, Torres explained. We're very good at finding unconventional solutions to complex problems. Such as showing up uninvited to a Galactic Council meeting with 1,000 ships and a comprehensive plan to reorganize galactic security. Korath had to admit she had a point. Admiral Torres, he said carefully, what makes you think the galaxy needs human intervention? Because Torres replied, we've been watching you for centuries and frankly you're terrible at this. The chamber fell silent again. This time it wasn't the shocked silence of earlier. This was the kind of silence that preceded either violence or profound embarrassment. Terrible at what, exactly? Counselor Grix asked. At being a galactic civilization. You have 47 different species represented in this chamber. And you can't agree on anything. You have trade disputes that have been going on for decades. You have security problems that everyone knows about but no one wants to address. You have entire sectors of space that are basically lawless because nobody wants to take responsibility for them. That's not Blimp began. That's exactly what it is, Torres interrupted, and we know because we've been studying you. We've been learning from your mistakes. We've been preparing. Preparing for what? For this moment. For the day when Earth would take its place in the galactic community. For the day when humans would help fix what's broken. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward again. We don't want to conquer anyone, she said. We don't want to impose our will on other species. We just want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And we want to make sure that something is worth being part of. And if we refuse? Korath asked. Torres shrugged. Then we'll go home, and you can continue managing things the way you have been. But we'll still be there watching, listening, and probably helping out when things get really bad. Helping out? Why don't? Pirates attack a defenseless colony ship. We'll be there. Slavers raid a peaceful planet? We'll stop them. Weapons smugglers threaten civilian populations? We'll shut them down. Without authorization? Without waiting for authorization. We've learned that sometimes doing the right thing is more important than following the rules. The implications of this statement hung in the air like a sword. The humans were essentially saying they would act as a galactic police force whether the council approved or not. That's vigilantism, Counselor Thrix protested. That's responsibility, Torres replied. Something that seems to be in short supply around here. Dr. Webb cleared his throat. We've prepared a detailed proposal, he said, producing another data pad. It outlines our suggested approach to galactic security, including patrol routes, response protocols, and coordination with existing law enforcement. You've thought of everything, Korath said. We try to be thorough. And if we accept your proposal? Then we become partners. We share our technology, you share yours. We help maintain order, you help us understand the political complexities. We work together to build something better than what exists now. The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then Counselor Grix spoke up. What guarantees do we have that you won't simply take over? None, Torres replied honestly, except our word, and the fact that we've had the capability to take over for several decades and haven't done it. Several decades? We've had faster than light travel for longer than you think. We've just been discreet about it. How discreet? We've been operating in the Outer Rim for the past 20 years. Fighting pirates, rescuing slaves, stopping weapons shipments. We just didn't advertise it. The silence that followed was profound. The humans hadn't just arrived out of nowhere. They'd been active in galactic affairs for decades, operating in the shadows, doing the work that no one else wanted to do. You've been here all along, Korath said slowly. We've been preparing, learning, making sure we were ready for this moment. And now you are. Now we are. Korath looked around the chamber at the faces of his fellow council members. He saw fear, uncertainty, and hope. The humans were offering to solve problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. They were also representing a fundamental shift in the balance of power. I call for a vote, he said finally. All in favor of accepting the human proposal for membership in the Galactic Council? The votes came in slowly. Some were enthusiastic, others were reluctant. But in the end, the result was clear. The motion carries, Korath announced. Welcome to the Galactic Council, Admiral Torres. Torres smiled, and for the first time it looked genuinely warm rather than diplomatically dangerous. But thank you, Vex Prime. This is going to be the beginning of something special. As the ceremony concluded and the various species began to mingle, Korath found himself standing next to Torres, watching the organized chaos of interspecies diplomacy. Admiral, he said, I have to ask, what took you so long? Torres grinned. We wanted to make sure we got it right the first time. Humans have a saying, better late than never. And another saying, better safe than sorry, Korath added. Exactly. Though I think in this case, it's more like better prepared than surprised. Outside the viewport, the human fleet maintained its perfect formation, no longer a threat but a promise. The galaxy had new guardians, whether it wanted them or not. And somehow Korath thought that was probably exactly what they needed. Admiral, he said, I have a feeling this is going to be a very interesting partnership. Vex Prime, Torres replied, you have no idea.